So good afternoon, everyone. We are having today our class of the curriculum needs advanced topics on intelligent data analysis. Today with a special audience, large audience, which is very good. So we have the pleasure of having our colleague Ana Margarida Ferreira. And thank you very much for your availability to give us this presentation. And I will talk about the AI Act for Human and Data Protection. Please, Ana, let me start.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for being here. So today I'm going to share with you some of the content, let's say, regarding the AI Act and human protection and data protection. So I'll try to get some ideas of the main requirements and goals regarding this regulation. First, I want to start with a disclaimer. So this will be a perspective, my perspective from the AI Act, right? I'm not a legal person, it's not my background. So I'm trying to give you an idea of what I think is the most important issues and aspects. So I hope we can raise lots of questions to discuss, which I'm sure we will. So let's start. So I'm going to focus mainly on privacy and cybersecurity. I think it's important to tackle some of the concepts and clarify them, because I'm a cybersecurity specialist and that's my background. So I tend to try to connect all these regulations in terms of what needs to be protected and how. Then I'll give an overview, very brief, about some EU regulation that is coming out. We have so many coming out now, and we need to make sure we know them and what is the intersections, the mergings, and so on. But obviously, we're not going to detail this here today. And then I'll try to connect also, again, AI with cybersecurity, and then maybe help, the AI Act will help me gather some ideas about how to protect AI and so on. And then we'll focus a bit more on the details about the AI Act. So I'd like to start with this main clarification of the concepts, the difference between privacy and cybersecurity. I'm sure many of you already know. But I like to come from the privacy and our fundamental right of privacy to control who protects what, and also we have this right to know who is accessing what, from where, to what purpose, and so on. And this is a fundamental right registered in the United Nations, Article 12, if you are curious. And then obviously it's about protecting our data. So we need measures to do that. Legislation is not enough. It's one of the main aspects as well, but we need mechanisms on the ground. We need the policies, we need the procedures in order to apply this in the practice. And cybersecurity is about that. It's about the collection of all these procedures, mechanisms, and policies to actually provide this in practice. But it's not only about to guarantee privacy. In practice, it's also about protecting assets. So one of the main assets in cybersecurity is human being. But this is always on the top, and then the risks come after that. So cybersecurity wants and aims to do that. But I usually hear people saying, I have nothing to hide. There's no problem. I don't need to protect anything or anyone. But in fact, we always have something to protect, right? Even if it is our lives, our integrity, mental, physical, and also our goods, our work. I mean, in the business we have, to protect our industrial property. Also in research we have to protect our results. So yeah, we have intellectual property and so on. We need to make sure we have that, because not all of us are good. So we need to protect ourselves. So about cybersecurity, I want to give some ideas of what is it about. It's about three main dimensions usually. So it's about confidentiality, prevent unauthorized access. So whoever does not have authorization to do it shouldn't access information, and we have controls to do that. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Then we have integrity. So integrity is about not only access, but it's about modification. We shouldn't allow people who don't have authorization to do it to modify data. So, and then we have a third dimension, which sometimes is not very well remembered, and it should be there as well in order to balance all these issues, which is availability. So we need to access whenever needed, because if we have everything is very well secured and hidden and everything, then we don't use it. So we don't take benefit of the information. So what's the point of securing if you're not going to be use it after all? And in healthcare, it's something that probably sometimes availability needs to stand before confidentiality or integrity in some situations. Obviously, the main idea is to have it balanced, but if not possible, at least to make sure that we adapt these dimensions to what we need at a certain context. So just very briefly about confidentiality, just to give an example. So we may have vulnerabilities in terms of login and passwords. I'm sure you can think of some, like, not very good passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or something like Benfica, which is one of the main passwords used in Portugal.
It's a bad password.
Okay, it's not very good, but I'm not going to comment on that, but still, it's what it is. Then we can have problems of access control policies that are not well defined, or that we have someone that leaves an institution and then the authorization is still there, so it can still access things, which unfortunately is very common to happen. And then we can also have sniffing, someone that is within a communication channel and listening to everything, so seeing things coming and going without altering anything. So this is very difficult to detect because there is no changes, the pattern still is the same, so there is no changes in detecting this kind of attack, which is an attack man in the middle attack. And then we have mechanisms, hopefully, to protect that. So cybersecurity has some ideas on how to protect it. So we have the identification and authentication mechanisms. We can have biometrics. We can have various types of authentication. We can also have something we know. We use that many times when we need to know a password. It's something we know, or we have to insert a code. So all these combination of these types of authentication mechanisms makes it stronger for us for the system to be more secure. However, it can also impact on usability. So we need to think about these things as well, because if you have to put a password every 5 minutes, or if you have to put a password, then you put biometrics, then you have a card, and then something else, obviously this one will compromise, again, the system, because people will find easier ways to bypass it. Then obviously we need to have proper policies in terms of access control. We have cryptography in order to protect the communication, to encrypt data, and also monitoring. Monitoring is transversal or orthogonal to everything. We need to register things to make sure we detect problems early on, and then how to correct them, right? Otherwise, if you don't monitor, we don't know what's going on. In terms of integrity, you can also have some issues, for example, software errors. You can have also virus, malware, bugs that we haven't detected because we didn't test properly the system, or because we couldn't find them. So, or you can have inserting data where it's not supposed to be inserted in specific fields in the database, or even the hardware, right? It can not function properly and just, goes away, and then it provokes problems it modifies data or deletes data without authorization. And then we can have some mechanisms also to improve this. So can have digital signatures. So encryption provides digital signatures to make sure something hasn't, or to detect the differences in a file, for example. So hash functions and digital signatures helps us to make sure that the information hasn't altered. Then we can have data validation in order to see if within a form we actually inserted proper information before storing in the database or in a file. Standards are also helpful to have proper communication between interoperability between systems and other consistency methods. Then in terms of availability, we can think of many things, right? You can just say, okay, can have natural disasters, we can have just the energy that goes, internet, wireless is gone. So many things can happen in order to impact the access to information. And can also have logical attacks like denial of service attacks and ransomware. I'm sure you all have heard about this, unfortunately. And then in order to do this, to improve this, you can have security copies like backups, auditing, monitoring, again, essential to make sure the systems are up or not in order to recover them if they are not. And redundant equipment, logical again, and the software, but also in hardware. So this is just a small overview. I don't want to bother you too much with cybersecurity, but to have an idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about privacy and cybersecurity in the presentation. So this is just an idea of the list that we have currently in EU regulation. So mostly regarding cybersecurity and privacy. So very briefly, we have GDPR. I'm sure you all heard about the Personal Data Protection Regulation in EU. So this is about process data, personal data in a secure manner. So this is compulsory in every state member. Then we have NIS2 as well, which needs to be implemented right away, which is about the service providers of essential services. Healthcare is also part of it, but communication, energy, food, and supplies and so on. So all these providers need to make sure they have cybersecurity set into place through all the supply chain. And this is very relevant, and it's now coming now. So we also have these acts that focus on financial sector. I don't know much about it, but it seems also interesting and important. Then we have Cybersecurity Act. So it's about certification of products. So products which have digital parts and not only, they need to be certified in terms of cybersecurity to make sure that they have the main cybersecurity aspects covered. But this has many issues because it's very difficult to certify a product, as you may understand, because a product may have a hardware, may have a software, may have different components, and you need to certify parts, all of them, and how they interact with each other and with others, because we know that the network is connected to everywhere. So this has been a bit delayed. It's not easy because they want to create certification bodies and to make sure they follow all these procedures, but it takes a lot of time and resources. Then we have another one, which is Cyber Resilience Act, to ensure that from security by design and by default. So it's kind of similar to GDPR in terms of privacy, because GDPR focuses on privacy by design. This one focuses on cybersecurity by design. So from the beginning of the product until the end and throughout the life cycle to ensure that cybersecurity is there. It's something also very resource demanding. And then we reach to the AIA, the Artificial Intelligence Act, whose aim is actually to have a harmonized set of rules within the European Union in order to have these products safe in terms of health, safety, and fundamental rights, which is a mixture of many things that there are from the other acts. And I think it turns it very, very complex to achieve. But let's see. So now a little bit about AI, and also AI in cybersecurity. Well, AI, it's very difficult to think about when it started really. There is this first, in Gulliver's Travels, this idea of the engine, or a large mechanical contraption to assist scholars in generating new ideas. This idea that a machine could help us be creative and so on. But obviously there are many references to other, things, let's say, mechanisms that throughout the history. But in fact, it was in 1956 that John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence, and he helped to kind of develop a language called Lisp, that it's going to be the first AI programming language in order to be able to do research in the intelligence systems and so on. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because history of AI, it's not my forte, but I think this kind of makes sense, because usually when we hear about AI, we hear about Turing, right? The first machine that was built by Turing, the Turing test, and so on. But I'm not going to dwell on this. It's just a curiosity. It's interesting to see that during the 70s and the 80s, early 80s, there was some kind of AI winter. So there was no kind of, people did not get very excited about AI. There was no funding. But then it recovered with IBM Deep Blue, the machine that won the chess, to the chess champion. So I think that took up again the interest in AI, and that's where we are now, right? With generative AI and things evolving very, very fast. So the EU wanted to actually try to keep up as well with this evolution and try to regulate, because we know that AI can bring many benefits, but it can also have not so beneficial impact in all of us. So for me, to keep it simple, I think, so AI systems are systems that have capability to infer from data, from big data or not, it depends, to obtain predictions, recommendations, decisions, and this can actually have an impact in physical and virtual environments. And from this data, they can also derive models or algorithms that they can be reused and adapted to different systems. So for me, and again, my perspective, AI for cybersecurity can have many advantages because it can enhance the tools that we have now, can make them faster, optimizing, and it can correlate a lot of sources of the information in very fast, something that the human brain cannot, because we don't have all this information inside of us, or that we are not connected to that like the systems are. So it will be, I think, very important to use AI in order to improve detection, prevention, even generate other ways of protecting that we cannot see it yet. So I think this can be really, really useful, and we should have more people focusing on these intersectional areas. However, I have an issue with we talk about AI for cybersecurity, but I have an issue of cybersecurity for AI, because when you flip the coin, it's very difficult for me to envisage something powerful enough to protect or to secure AI, unless it is AI. But then what secures AI? And it's this circle that for me, I'm still trying to figure out how this can happen. So we don't have enough tools as yet in order to provide cybersecurity for AI. We have what we have until now. It is okay. It is something that it's still okay. It's good, but we need to probably be a bit more creative about thinking some other tools to provide for this. And maybe the AI Act can help us some way in trying to understand how and what we can secure and how. Let's see. So now we're going to enter in the AI Act, so the goals, requirements, and then we'll talk a little bit about AIA for health, what is in there in order to focus on specific health requirements. So AIA goals. So again, I repeat that I took as much as possible from the text, so it may be a bit too much full of text, I try not to. But in order to not go away too much from what is there in the legislation. So it is, again, my interpretation, but closer enough, or I hope close enough to the text of the legislation. So the main idea or the main goal of this act is to lay down an uniform legal framework for development and place on the market, and put AI systems into service and use, in the European Union. So the main idea, and again, this is where it starts to be different from other legislations, is that it needs to be human-centric and trustworthy. So it starts here to be more, or they want to be closer to the human and to be trustworthy, something that is, difficult to achieve in systems. How do you measure trust, and how do you measure trust in computer science and AI systems? But that's the main goal, to ensure high level of protection of health, safety, and fundamental rights. So it's focused on human and human protection. And obviously, when you try to protect human, you also need to protect their data. So again, it's about improving human well-being. So this is directly quoted from the Act. But if we are worried already from our research perspective, hopefully, the Act also mentions that it's supposed to support innovation and freedom of science. So we exclude AI systems that are being tested, trained, being researched within, academic fields, institutes. So this regulation does not directly apply to systems that are being tested, developed, and not already that want to be going to the market or in use with the vast population. So the main requirements that I think are relevant are, for example, the scope. So to whom it applies to providers, so the developers of the system. So whoever develops the system and wants to put it into the market to be used in the union. Then also to deployers. In this case, in the legislation, as far as I understood, deployers are the ones that are using the systems. So for me, it doesn't make much sense, but it's what it's there. So there is someone that develops, puts in the market, and someone actually uses and interacts and benefits or not from it. Then you can also have importers, obviously, someone that, and distributors. That makes sense in the supply chain. And then they need to be located in the union or in a third country, but they need to be registered. They need to be represented by someone who is established in the union. So it may be from a third country that does not belong to the union, but it needs to have some sort of authorization from someone established in the union to actually provide the service in the union. And also affected persons located in the union. For me, what I understood affected persons is every one of us that can be affected by the interaction with the system. And now for me, also the main focus of this act, and it's interesting that it's focused and it's human-centric and it's focused on trustworthy, but the main issue is actually risk. So how do they measure trust? How do they measure if the system is protected? They need to do it with the risk assessment. They don't find it another way, which is interesting. From a cybersecurity perspective, it's one of the main issues to actually assess the risk and verify what are vulnerabilities and try to understand the mitigation actions. So that's why I consider this act very close to, privacy and cybersecurity. So 4 main risks: one that is unacceptable, so prohibited; one that is high risk, which will be, I think, the most common ones, especially in healthcare, but it needs to be seen. Then we have limited risk, which is focused more on transparency risks. So I'll explain a little bit more further. And then minimal risks, okay? So a little bit about unacceptable risks. Within the Act, they focus on 8 main AI practices which are forbidden. They are prohibited. You cannot do that. They are clear threats to safety, livelihoods, rights of people. And so these are prohibited to be deployed within the EU. So we have manipulation and deception, exploitation of vulnerability, especially related with humans. So age-related disability, even their own beliefs and so on, their race, and this also on part 7. But anyway, something that can be exploited from the human characteristics. Criminal. So if you use this for predicting the risk of someone committing a crime, so this should be also forbidden. So if you just go to the internet, get biometric material in order to fill a database of facial recognition information, you shouldn't do that. Emotion recognition in workplaces and education institutions, obviously, except for medical or safety reasons, if you are doing some sort of research or treatment, but still it's forbidden to have emotion recognition in workplaces and education institutions. And then use a biometric characterization. So what I was saying before, it's forbidden to use biometric categorization when you focus on people's characteristics in order to gather information about spatial data. So this spatial data is also related with the personal data protection. The GDPR states they have Article 9 spatial data category, which is about philosophical beliefs, sexual orientation, race, all these high sensitive data. And so systems that actually focus on biometrics, gather information in order to derive information and profiling people on these special data categories, they are forbidden. And also some real-time remote biometric data for law enforcement, for example, but obviously it depends. In some cases, it may be necessary and so on. So this is always difficult to be certain that you shouldn't say yes or no. Sometimes it's in the middle. So these are all forbidden. Now we enter the high-risk systems, which I think many of them probably will be in the future. So these are still posing serious risks to health and the safety and fundamental rights, but you can still put them into the market if you have, but you need to fill some obligations. What are these kind of systems? So within the legislation, we have, for example, safety components in critical infrastructures. They can put life at risk. Education institutions, so solutions for education institutions that can determine scoring of exams and access to education, all this information. Also about other safety components, for example, applied. There's an interesting example here in robot-assisted surgery. Also used for employment or management of workers. So if you use AI systems to understand if someone should be recruited or not, or should be excluded or not. Again, remote biometric identification, interfere with people's fundamental rights. So this is lots of things, even in the cases of migration, asylum. So to decide whether to enter someone, if you apply for a visa application, for example, and so on, and just in the democratic processes. Obviously, this is very dense, but it's just to have an idea of the context where the AI can be high risk, considered high risk. Then we have a limited risk. So these systems are more regarding the transparency. So they have risks in terms of transparency. So the idea is for these systems, humans should be aware of what they are interacting with. So if they are interacting with a chatbot, it needs to be clear, they are defined, and some sort of labeling saying, okay, you are interacting with an artificial system and not with a real person. And so this needs to be something that needs to be put there within this kind of systems, which is not easy. Also for transparency requirements, they are also within the high risk systems, which I'm going to detail a little bit further. So minimal risk, hopefully they don't have risk to the fundamental rights, health of humans, but still within the regulation, they need to be documented. They need to be, everything, why they consider it is not a high risk, why they consider it is a minimal risk. So documentation needs to be there, information needs to be given to national competent authorities, and it still needs to be registered in the EU database as a system that is, ready to go to the market. So currently, I found this citation that the current AI systems are mostly fall into this category. I tend to disagree, but well, we will see. So what happens in practice? Well, I'm not giving you the detailed procedure of what needs to happen, but this is very generic. But still, if you have a high-risk AI system, you need to undergo a conformity assessment. So within the legislation, you need to demonstrate that it follows within all the requirements and obligations of this legislation, which I'm going to detail a little bit further. Then obviously, if this is okay, you have a conformity assessment, then you need to register in the EU database, I was saying, and then it's to have the CE brand and marking before being put in the market. And then obviously the system may evolve, right? It may change for some reason. It may be altered, it may be, if you have substantial changes, you need to do the process again. So that's how it's supposed to work. Then you can also have conformity assessment bodies. I don't know if we have already something. I don't think we do. But this can help, is a third party can help you conform with all these requirements. Also, there is a European AI office, which can help, let's say, supervise authorities and member states if they are, and helping also in implementing and enforcing this AI Act in practice. And in terms of responsibility, most of it falls into the providers. So the providers that want to put the system in the market, they need to make sure they go through this conformity assessment. Yes, and if they are in third countries, again, they need to be represented by some authority established in the Union. And also, they need the roles of which, within the supply chain of the system, all the roles need to be well identified. And all the interactions, they need to be cumulative and so on. So that's it. Okay, so now specific to high risk, we need to know what are the main requirements, the strict obligations. So they need to have adequate risk assessment and mitigation. The data sets need to be high quality. They need to have the minimized risks and discriminatory issues inside. We need to register everything. Traceability needs to be there for the whole, what is happening. detailed documentation of all the information, and clear and adequate information to the deployer as well. So the ones that are going to be used need to understand what the system does, what are the problems, the implications, and so on. And then you need to, this is another, for me, complex issue, which is human oversight measures. So they need to be measures so that human needs to be in control on top of knowing exactly what's happening and supervising what's happening, which is, well, still a bit difficult to see it in practice. And again, in the end, the part of robustness, cybersecurity, and accuracy needs to be there. In terms of transparency, we can bring transparency requirements that we talked about when we had a limited risk. So I'm going to focus very quickly on each one of the other requirements. So risk assessment process needs to be done from the beginning until the end of the life cycle of the product. So what does it mean, risk assessment? It's actually making sure we look at the vulnerabilities, the risks that are there, the impact. So a definition of risk is actually the impact times the probability of something occur, something wrong occur, and then we have an impact. So that's how we calculate risk. But so the idea is to make this risk list and try to mitigate, apply measures in order to minimize them, and keep checking and checking and checking. There's a never-ending cycle. Then in terms of data sets for training and data quality, we need to have management practices, data governance. We need to make sure that it's free of errors. And well, it's, for me, again, very difficult how we're going to do this, but this needs to be in place. Traceability already talked about. So we need to make sure we kind of try to follow what the system does from the beginning to the end, make sure we have a clear idea of what it does. Also, what kind of characteristics data it integrates, what algorithms are used to test, and so on. Technical documentation needs to be there always. And there's interesting this part there where we should have also, technical automatic recording of events. So you still need to have systems to actually record the events of another automatic system. Interesting. Again, regarding human oversight. So we need to make sure systems are used as intended, prevent harmful. Again, the human is in the center. We need to make sure it does not provide risks or impact negatively the user, the human. They should be identified by the provider. These measures, what measures the provider is putting into practice in order to provide for this human oversight requirement. And should focus on the benefits as well as protection of the natural person and control and so on. So it shouldn't come outside of the human sphere. I don't know if you have, an idea how this can be done. I don't have. So it will be interesting to discuss on this. So how can we, a system that has such potential and can integrate information from so many sources and evolve so quickly, not coming outside the human sphere. And then we reach the privacy and data protection. So the AIA Act actually focused on privacy, data protection, and cybersecurity. But in fact, what I found, at least from my perspective, was that it focuses mostly, it gives the personal data protection to the GDPR. So you should do everything that GDPR says, and it doesn't integrate more measures or ideas on how to actually improve privacy and data protection. So if you only focus on GDPR, which was a legislation much way previous to this, GDPR doesn't focus on other fundamental rights than privacy, at least in my idea. And it doesn't really provide measures for a life cycle. Just say you need to do data minimization, you need to do, encrypt data, pseudonymization. But how are you going to do this in the whole process from the beginning to the end of the maintenance of the system life cycle? So I don't know, I have an issue here. And it's interesting also this part, how to provide that the training system, so someone needs to train something needs to train the system, but what is training the systems needs also to be protected. So it needs something that we trust. We trust that it's going to copy things, it's not going to insert issues that we don't want to. So how to make sure that whatever is training the system is also secure and protects data. And then we have more specific to cybersecurity. So here it's about cybersecurity, guarantee system that we know systems risks that we mitigate and so on. I don't want to bother you. I'm sure you already, it's about protecting data. So specific to AI, they focus, they have some ideas. So they focus on the model leakage. So there are specific issues and problems regarding the AI systems. So how to protect the model without being leaking information to other systems accidentally or not. Unauthorized releases, model theft, all this we need to consider as being specific issues related with the AI system. And also make sure that they are not biased. They don't enter in these feedback loops. So whatever outputs are generated, they don't integrate. Again, they are not input of other things that are not correct, right? They don't integrate biases and so on. So this feedback loop is also something that the regulation aims to prevent. Now about fundamental rights. I don't know if you know much about fundamental rights, but within the legislation, they talk about many different ones. And the main focus of the legislation is actually to protect fundamental rights. We need to think about not only privacy, we need to think about family life, freedom of expression. I'm reading, okay, because I don't know why. Right to education, consumer protection, workers' rights. So how do we make sure a system actually provides for all these fundamental rights? And within the legislation, the high-risk system needs to go through a process which is called fundamental rights impact assessment. So how do we do this? We need to do this prior to its use, identify risks and measures, etc. And then we need to make sure that the FRIA, what I call the FRIA, is there. So this is also something very interesting, but complex. So talking now about the part of ethics, which I think is very much closely related with the AIA, because besides being there, so this part of there was a group of people, which I know very experts in ethics and AI, I assume, that actually discussed these issues and tried to make sure to devise what are main ethical principles for AI. And they are very much related with the scope of the regulation. So it's about human agency oversight. We talked about that. It's one of the requirements. Technical robustness and safety, cybersecurity is one of the requirements. Privacy, data governance, again, transparency. So it's very much closely related with what is the main requirements of the Act. So ethical principles are very much close connection. So again, we have this multitude of different domains that need to be to work together, right? Legislation, cybersecurity, technical, privacy, ethical, AI. So obviously, so we need to make sure how can we put this into practice in our society among us, and especially in EU, and then how EU can actually integrate with others, with other countries. Now, sorry, I probably am too, I don't know about time, but I'm almost there. Okay, please don't fall asleep yet. So what I did in terms of try to understand what the AI Act was related to healthcare. I didn't do much detail, okay, but what I did was find terms. So find healthcare within the Act, within the document, find the term medical device, and then find the term health. So what I found was healthcare appeared 6 times, medical devices 9, and health 72. But 72 because they talk about the AI purpose, which is protection of health, safety, and fundamental rights, or health and safety. So I excluded this, and in the end, we got more or less 22. So what are the main, in my opinion, what I can extract or I liked from that? In terms of healthcare, so they focus about, AI can be good. I mean, have great benefits and bring competitive advantages in terms of many domains. And one of them is healthcare. So there is this idea that, okay, it can support and be really, really beneficial for healthcare. There's others, as you see here, are the agriculture, food safety, education. So many of them are critical infrastructures, others not. But many different areas where it can be supported. Then we have also, regarding AI risk systems, high risk systems, we have healthcare services. So it's been identified of one of, in the Annex 3, it's about the institutions or the domains where we may have high risk systems. And we can have, for example, including healthcare services, it's one of them. And also, well, this is, I think, obvious, in emergency healthcare patient triage systems can also be very relevant. It makes sense to be high risk systems that can impact health and safety of humans. Then regarding the fundamental right impact assessment, also, it seems like for healthcare, depending on the services, we also may need to have this impact assessment regarding fundamental rights. So we need to make sure we see this very well when we are talking about AI systems for healthcare. Then medical devices, we also have some issues there in the legislation. So if there are safety components of high risk AI, probably medical devices may be one of the considered high risk if they have this type of components. Then we can also have simultaneous and complementary application of various legislation. In terms of medical devices, you may see that we have many different legislations. We have legislation for certified medical devices, then we have data protection, then we have this one, and then we have many others that we saw in the beginning. So this is very difficult to actually, when we are dealing with this type of devices, we need to make sure we are in contact with all the necessary requirements in terms of legislation. Then we have also testing conformity facilities to products. So we can have, when we have medical devices which need to be conformant with the specific regulation, they also need to have this. And regarding health, I'll just extract a little bit. So the ones that can be prohibited, again, are the ones that can impact physical or psychological health, for example. So this could be systems that may be forbidden to be deployed in the EU. Then diagnostics and decision support should be reliable and accurate. And obviously we have their health as one of the examples. So again, high risk systems. Then it's also mentioned the EU health data space to facilitate non-discriminatory timely access. So the idea of this big space where health data can be there. So they give the example of health data because they talk about data spaces in general, but they give the example of EU health data. So in order to help training algorithms and trying to preserve things in a specific state and in a transparent and trustworthy manner, this could be a good option to test and try AI algorithms, for example. And health was given here as an example. Then we have personal data processed for developing and training AI. So we have this thing in the regulation, which is called AI regulatory sandbox. So a sandbox is usually some safe space where you can test things without being connected with the outside world, let's say. So there is this idea that, institutions can provide this sandbox for people to test the AI systems. And this, again, in areas like public safety or public health, this should be done, and healthcare systems as well. So. And finally, regarding health insurance, of course, this would have to appear here, right? So AI high risk systems, it can have a great impact on people's lives. And also in terms of migration, again, health risk and so on, things that have a risk to health. So it's the basis in a way of the regulatory framework. So in the end, just it entered to force in 1 August, 1st August 2024. So ideally it will be applicable in 2026. We should have this live, let's say, in practice, and things are still being developed, but hopefully in 1-2 years, this is going to be, part of our lives if we are AI developers or using AI, which probably it's all of us. So thank you so much. I have lots of questions that I have here, but I will leave you to the option for you to actually question yourself. And I may not have many answers, but I'm happy to help and discuss many of these issues. I hope it was interesting and useful. If not, then sorry for that. But still, I hope something remains. It's very difficult to talk about legislation when you're not a legal person, and even if you are, it's difficult to have a message from. This is a very complex legislation, very big. Okay? And when you talk about trust, when you talk about health and fundamental rights in the same sentence, for me, it's really complex. So we need to really discuss and make sure we know, find solutions and innovative ideas to tackle this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.